Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Aaron Churchill, and I'm the research and data analyst for the Thomas B. Fordham Institute here in Columbus, Ohio. The Fordham Institute is the nation's leader in advancing educational excellence for every child through quality research, analysis and commentary, as well as on-the-ground action and advocacy in Ohio. We have three main things we do. We advocate for high standards for schools, students, and educators, quality options for families, a more productive, equitable, and efficient education system. We promote education reform by producing rigorous policy research and incisive analysis, building coalitions with policymakers, donors, organizations, and other people who share our vision. As you'll see on your front tables, we have our newest report, which we'll be discussing today, Pluck and Tenacity, how private schools in Ohio have adapted to vouchers. And also, available on our website is a recent publication we published called Public Accountability and Private School Choice, a toolkit for policymakers. That is available on our website, www.edexcellence.net/Ohio. We're very pleased to have our panel here today for the leaders from the schools we profiled. One of the leaders, Chad Harville of Eden Grove Academy, could not make it, and he sent his regrets. And you can tweet this event. We're on Twitter, and the hashtag is #Vouchers. And that hashtag shows up on our PowerPoint slide, and feel free to tweet or make comments or questions about the event today. With that, we're very pleased to introduce Ellen Belcher, the lead investigator for this report, who wrote it. She's done outstanding work for us, and she's the former editorial-page editor at the Dayton Daily News. Ellen will present about 10 minutes of remarks, and then we'll have a panel discussion with the four leaders, and then there'll be a panel discussion with three policy experts in the area of vouchers. So with that, I'd like to invite Ellen to the podium.
I have never been called a lead investigator before. I feel like I joined the State Highway Patrol this morning. So anyway, good morning, and thank you all for coming. I know it's bitterly cold out there, and we at least have a crowd that drove in from Youngstown, so that's a long ride this early in the morning. But my job is to very quickly tell you a little bit about what we did, how we did it, what I learned, and what I saw. The goal of this project, which started last spring, was to learn what was happening on the ground with schools that are participating in Ohio's EdChoice program. While more than 300 private schools in Ohio are accepting voucher students, there really hasn't been a whole lot of investigation into how the program is working for those schools, for those parents, and for their students. So we decided that I would visit 5 schools, and that number, I have to tell you, was wholly arbitrary, and we then proceeded to choose the schools in an equally unscientific way. To my knowledge, the only school that any of us had any prior knowledge about was St. Martin de Porres in Cleveland, and Fordham has long been an admirer of the Cristo Rey network that St. Martin's is part of. In making our choices, we knew that we wanted geographic diversity, we were hoping for religious diversity, and honestly, we struggled with that. And we also wanted to look at high schools, not just elementary schools. The plan, and as we all know, plans don't always work out that way, was to include a non-religious school in our mix, but we were rebuffed by a Cincinnati independent school. The parents there are passionately divided about whether the school should be participating in EdChoice, and it is, and 50% of the students there are receiving vouchers. But some parents believe the vouchers are undermining public educations, while others in the school are equally adamant that the kids deserve a publicly funded alternative to their nearby failing public schools. The administration's decision was that they had enough problems that they didn't need me poking around and fanning that debate, and obviously I would have loved to have told that story and understood it a little bit better. The profiles that we did end up doing are snapshots. They are not the definitive story on vouchers in Ohio. And I, of course, want you to read every word that I wrote, but I know that's probably not going to happen. So I'm going to try to entice you with a little bit about each of them that I thought was important. And then I'll conclude with 5 observations that I think are worth pondering as Ohio comes up on the 10-year anniversary of vouchers. I'm going to begin with Youngstown Christian because that's where I began my sweep across Ohio around the state last spring. Mike Pecchia and Josh Reichard, both of whom are here, have an incredible understanding of what is important to voucher families and voucher students. This will surprise some voucher critics, but they too feel the pain of competition. Youngstown's suburban public schools are embracing open enrollment with a vengeance. That has profound implications for schools like Youngstown Christian and Youngstown's once robust Catholic school landscape. To survive, Youngstown Christian has to attract children who once could only go to a public school in their district, a charter school, or pay to attend a private school. But increasingly, these kids have multiple public school choices because so many nearby districts have adopted open enrollment policies. What's happening in Ohio with open enrollment is an important trend that ensures voucher schools cannot take their students for granted, and it's a trend not to be missed. Karen Hecker and Father Joseph Satish of Dayton's Immaculate Conception would be out of business today, but for vouchers. Put another way, in all honesty, they began taking vouchers in large part out of financial necessity. Vouchers are indisputably helping prop up struggling Catholic schools like Immaculate, but they are also helping the church expand its mission. Now, some people will be all for that, others will object, but the fact is Catholic schools would not be serving as many of the children that they're reaching today, but for vouchers. I was struck by the fact that Father Satish and others as well at Immaculate are genuinely conflicted about the reality that they are attracting children who otherwise would go to Dayton Public Schools. They get that Immaculate's gain is quite clearly Dayton Public Schools' loss. Besides losing money, Immaculate is creaming families. And make sure you heard what I just said. I did not say creaming students. I said creaming families. Immaculate is attracting families who are engaged in their children's education. And although these moms and dads are jumping through pretty minimal hoops to get a voucher, so their child can attend private school, they are making that effort, and they are making a choice for their child. They're not just putting them on a bus and hoping for the best. When a school district is stripped of parents who want to be partners at whatever level with their child's school, that's a loss. The third school I visited was St. Martin de Porres. For those of you who are not familiar with the Cristo Rey network, these schools have discovered a way to expose their low-income high school students to the world of work and at the same time help those students pay what it takes to provide a private, high-quality high school education. St. Martin and its sister schools have hit upon a business model that makes it possible for a parochial school to spend impressive amounts of money on educating kids. If you want to know how much, you got to read the report. And as you may know, Ohio's EdChoice voucher payment for high schools is just $5,000. That doesn't begin to cover the cost of a high-quality education. St. Martin's is not resorting to bake sales to fill this gap. Its students have jobs, and their paychecks, so to speak, pay their tuition. You really have to talk to these children, these kids, these young adults, to see how proud they are to be working. Don't ever underestimate what it means to have a job to a child who's growing up in a family that's struggling and whose parents may not have a job. None of the people I met on this project have easy jobs, but in the name of provoking this great group that you're going to hear from, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Deb O'Shea may possibly have the most difficult job of she and her colleagues. And I'm emphasizing she might have the most difficult job. But Deb works at St. Pat's in Toledo, and her school has the lowest percentage of voucher students of the schools that I visited. Having a small voucher student population is different than having a large voucher student population, and it creates different tensions and demands. When some children are getting quote unquote free tuition while others are paying, that creates all sorts of tensions and frustrations and confusions and misunderstanding and so forth. So Deb has to walk that line. But these struggles are not just hers. They really are the St. Pat Parish's struggles. Both at St. Pat's in Toledo and Immaculate in Dayton, parish politics, parish finances, and parish leadership are all central to the impact vouchers are having in Ohio. The last school I visited was Eden Grove in Cincinnati, and all I can tell you is that there has to be a divine force at work that is helping Chad Harville keep that school going. Making budget with just 98 kids in a K-8 school is not something very many of us would try. Excuse me. I was humbled by Chad's determination and his profound sense of mission. So, at the end of the day, what did we all discover? What did we learn? Here are 5 very quick thoughts that I had as I reflected on my visits and my interviews. Ohio now has 5 different voucher programs. Lawmakers are going to find it very difficult to ever eliminate vouchers. They have become institutionalized. The families that have them, the schools that depend on them for their very existence, or just to fill a funding gap, are hooked. There is no politically convenient time to sunset this sort of program, and it doesn't matter whether you think that reality is good or bad. The important fact to know is that an ever-growing constituency has been created, and the beneficiaries have tasted what the state can do for them, their schools, and for their children. If a child gets a voucher in kindergarten and renews it through graduation, that family receives the equivalent of a $50,000 private school subsidy. What's not to like about that? A second takeaway, vouchers have grown piecemeal in Ohio, and maybe that was by design, maybe it was by accident, but the growth does have consequences for public schools, for the state's budget, for voucher schools' budgets, and for parents' budgets. Today, more than 19,000 children are receiving a voucher either under Ed Choice or the new expanded kindergarten voucher program. That's not counting the Cleveland voucher students, the John Peterson voucher students, or the autistic voucher students. Last year, when Ohio expanded vouchers to kindergarten children who are not assigned to a failing public school, the state took a leap. Children must be low income to be eligible for this assistance, but they could be assigned to a perfectly wonderful public school and still get a voucher. Critics of vouchers, I think, have a fair point when they charge that voucher supporters should have to acknowledge what this change represents. Ohio is now financially supporting private schools for students who have a good private school option. In the beginning, the voucher debate, the argument for vouchers was that low-income students, not just children from families of means, deserve a quality school education. Maybe supporters are consciously trying to expand the program stealthily or incrementally, or maybe vouchers just beget more vouchers, or maybe policymakers don't really understand the long-term implications of what they're doing. But I would argue there ought to be a public debate about the turn that we're taking. If Ohio wants to create an ever-expanding parallel school system to its public school offerings, then advocates should have to make that case. It should not just happen by accident or because the public wasn't watching. My third thought, there needs to be more transparency and accountability at schools that accept large numbers of voucher students. When a school is dependent on its very survival for public funding, that school should have to publicly disclose how it's performing. Ohio's law requires that, but you try finding that information. The accountability movement that is occurring in public education should not bypass private schools just because they label themselves private. If the bulk of your money is from the state, how private are you? Private schools should not be allowed to use taxpayers' money to keep their doors open and then close their doors to public scrutiny. And I just want to make sure so there's no confusion. All of the folks on this panel happen to agree with that point of view, and they were all incredibly open to us. As we get better at giving the public and parents useful information about their schools, private schools will be the losers if they balk at transparency. In a world where data is king, parents aren't going to accept anything less than complete disclosure. Next to the last point. I mentioned earlier the all too obvious fact that powerful constituencies are being created that support vouchers, but there's something else that's happening out there. I was struck by talking to the students at St. Martin's by how fervently they believe that they are getting something better by going to private school. They brought it up on their own with no prodding that they're lucky to be attending the school. They are growing up believing that public schools are by definition inferior. And of course, we all know that doesn't have to be true, and it's certainly not true in all cases. The bigger question for us adults, I think, is, as a society, do we really want a large chunk of children growing up believing that one of the most democratizing institutions in our country is unquestionably subpar? The schools we looked at are, this is my last point, the schools we looked at are not markedly performing better than public schools with at-risk children in all cases. Nonetheless, parents are still happier with these schools, and I don't pretend to fully understand their thinking. But what I'd say on behalf of them is that there is something very appealing about these schools that you immediately feel when you walk through the door. There is a warmth, a friendliness, a welcoming attitude that you don't sense in every public school. Low-income parents are choosing schools that haven't figured out how to succeed academically with their children, but these schools have figured out how to persuade parents that they are on their side, that they are doing their best, and that their children are loved and safe, even if they're still woefully behind. That sense is powerful to families whose lives are full of barriers and obstacles that many of us can't possibly appreciate. I want to close by thanking Mike and Karen and Monica and Deb for their help, their incredible candor, their especially great commitment to children. Fordham and I are immensely grateful to them, and after this morning, I know you will be too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen, for those great comments. And I think you can see why we at Fordham, who like to see all sides of all issues and really explore and investigate and try to pick out nuggets of truth and facts from all situations, like to work with reporters like Ellen, who will question everything. And you know, as a society and as education reformers and as advocates for children, we should all do that. So. Well, without further ado, most of you did not come here to hear me speak, as sad as that makes me. Instead, I get the pleasure of moderating this panel with the private school leaders that Ellen shared little snippets of. So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to do a very quick introduction of each person, and then we'll go ahead and jump into some questions that I'll give them, and then I'll save hopefully around 10 minutes for all of you to ask questions as well. So the first person on the podium is Monica Lawson, who's the admissions director of St. Martin de Porres. Next, to her left, is Mike Pecchia, who is the president of Youngstown Christian. The next person, I can't really see, is Deb O'Shea, the principal at St. Pat's in Toledo. And finally, the last person, last but not least, is Karen Hecker, who is the principal at Immaculate Conception in Dayton. All right. So we'll see which one of them gets to be my first victim. I think I'll start with Mike. The question for you, and when you read these profiles, you'll probably come hopefully with some of the same questions that I'm going to pose to them. One of the things that really struck me about the profile is, you know, publicly vouchers, competition is often associated with the word vouchers. But Mike's school has faced tremendous amounts of competition that was profiled pretty well in this piece from charter schools, from the district he lives in, and from open enrollment. So I'd like to tell us a little bit about how that's worked for your school and what the pressures you face as a result of competition.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting us to be here. And I just want to start off by saying how humbled we are to be here. We don't have all the answers. I mean, we were picked, and when Ellen first called us, you know, we wanted to make sure what she was wanting to do, and then we said, yeah, come on in. You can see the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I'm not up here, and I think they'll all agree, we're not up here because we're experts. We're up here because we're doing what God has called us to do, and we're figuring it out as we go. The competition definitely, matter of fact, I think the church that started our school actually opened a charter school about 15 years ago. And, you know, at first I was just, geez, how can we go ahead and do that? And what I found was, you know what, it didn't really affect us that much. And I think part of the issue is there's such a need in Youngstown. I mean, we're in an area, there's such a need for better education, that even though the competition, and kids in Youngstown, kids in the city of Youngstown, 70% of our students come from the city of Youngstown. About 60% of them are on the Ed Choice Scholarship, and we also do the John Peterson Scholarship. So there's a lot of options. You know, we have a very large suburban district that takes a lot of kids from Youngstown. We have three large charter schools in our area. I think that why they come to us because with the being a Christian school, where that's really our intention, and the love that they feel in the atmosphere. And you talked about being safe. I mean, there are things that we can do to address the needs of families in the city of Youngstown. Parents are looking for their kids to be safe, to be nurtured, to be loved. And I think that's the difference that we can do, and public schools can't do as much. Not that, listen, they're great teachers in the public school system, but we're able to do that, and we lead with that. And so I think that's, you know, from a choice standpoint, they're choosing that also. But you have to have an equal education. Education is the qualifier. They're not going to come to a school that they think is going to love their kids if they're going to give them a lesser education. And I think that's probably the key for us.
That's great. Thanks, Mike. The next question will be for Karen. One of the things, I'm a kind of a numbers geek, so sometimes stats really get me. And one of the things in the report on her school was that approximately 1/3 of their students before vouchers had qualified for free and reduced price lunch. And I believe, if I have the number right, now it's 75% of students at the school are free and reduced price lunch. So what has that meant to your school? I mean, our society overall has moved in that direction, and we know some of the challenges that public schools face in that regard. How has that affected your school and what you're trying to accomplish?
Well, actually, that was last year's figure. We're at 83% now. So
outdated numbers, sorry.
It continues to go up. The challenges are we have to meet needs that aren't traditionally met in a school setting. We have to meet family needs. We have to reduce barriers for the students' learning. In those past 8 years, we've offered the breakfast program. We have a social worker and a clinical counselor from the University of Dayton servicing our families and students, doing everything from getting beds to helping them get jobs. It's very, very important that that family structure has the support it needs so it can support the children academically. I have to echo what Mike says. The families are seeking something else. And when I parallel it with my own, I live in the suburbs. I have a very good public school. My children went to Catholic school as well, not because I felt the academics were superior. They were going to get a superior education in both places, but there was something else that was offered. And that something else coincided with our values. And I think in our case, even though the students come to us in high poverty, oftentimes not Catholic as well, there's something else that's going on that's meeting the family's needs in addition to the concrete things, that welcoming environment, the respect, the dignity. And I don't think in high poverty instances and families living in poverty, they often experience that. They have lots of obstacles in their lives, lots of hoops to jump through, lots of physical places they have to go to meet basic needs.
Thank you. Next question is for Monica. One of the things, every once in a while you read something and it really just resonates with you. And one of the quotes from your president and school founder, Rich Clark, that concludes the profile of St. Martin's is that if you lose your culture, you lose your school. what does culture mean to St. Martin's? And if you do want to, I know Ellen described it a little bit, but if you want to put in a plug for the work aspect of your school in conjunction with answering this, feel free to go ahead and do that, because it really is an innovative type model.
Okay, thank you. So St. Martin de Porres is a part of something called the Cristo Rey Network of Schools. This is a national movement of schools across the country. We have 26 schools that commit to serving low-income families by placing them in a work program so that they can help their families offset the cost of their tuition at a private school. So we're lucky to have been in Cleveland for 10 years, and Columbus also have a school right here in your area. They're in their first year. So a part of the network in general is to be able to pretty much cultivate the type of students that we serve. These are the students that, they're average working class families, and they do deserve, quality education. And the parents have a choice as to whether or not that should be at St. Martin or any other school that's available to them in our area. What we find at St. Martin is that culture to us is that supportive, that nurturing commitment to each family, which Ellen talked about, as well as another panelist. We take in the family. It goes well beyond the student. We're helping parents receive their GEDs. We're helping parents learn to type. They're so proud of their students when they literally leave us with resumes, having worked at major companies in our city. So culture to us is family. It's taken in the whole family, not just the student.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Deb. One of the things that really resonated with me on yours, or that I thought was a real challenge that doesn't probably get the publicity for the general public that I think private schools understand, and Ellen mentioned this a little bit, but because only around 1/4 of your students use vouchers, do you want to elaborate a little bit on some of the adjustments for those families who were paying families, and then all of a sudden you have vouchers being accepted, some of what that has meant to your school, the challenges, the struggles, the benefits from, what you've had to work through, I guess, as a result of that?
Thank you very much. First of all, I need to say that it is true. We have a responsibility to work with our families, not just our students that are here at our schools. At St. Pat's, I'm in my 3rd year there, and I was formerly at a smaller Catholic school in Toledo who did accept the choice vouchers too, but there were even less there. When I came to St. Pat's, I remember doing my interview with the priest, and one of the things he asked was about my experience with the Ed Choice program and how I felt it might work if I was in St. Pat's. And I didn't know what had happened before I got there, but Ellen found out from interviewing my office manager that there were some rumblings when it began in 2006 that the parents who were paying wanted to put together a petition to say that it shouldn't be happening. And so they went to the baseball diamonds. This is all secondhand knowledge that I'm hearing. They went to the baseball diamond and they were trying to get signatures, and they found out they were asking the Ed Choice parents to sign it. And that's what really stopped. It made the parents stop and think about what they were doing. So I came in after that all happened, and things had already been settling down. We did lose some families. We did. There are some families that just didn't want to be part of it. But I think the rest of the families that said, I'm going to stay and I'm going to check this out and I'm going to make sure the school doesn't change. And I think Ellen quoted me about me saying that I don't feel that our culture has changed at St. Pat's. There are pieces that have changed, but our teachers have not changed their philosophy. Their culture that they have always given to our students, and the parish culture of what St. Pat's is all about, that has not changed at all. And the students and the families have adapted. Like, for instance, at our school, and I think at most of ours, when the Ed Choice students come in, they are required to learn religion every day. They're not required to do the sacraments. They're not required to do all the other things that all the Catholic students do, but they're required to do the learning part, and I have not had one family complain at both schools. They understand, and we have, at the other school at St. Pius, we've had at least 3 families while I was there who became Catholic. And I felt that was a success story, because not only are we of service to these students, but we are of service to those parents to help build their faith. So that's a success story in itself. To sum it all up, I think that it's really a piece that my school advisory council has really helped with since I came there, because they know the value of our school and they know the value of the Ed Choice students. So I think the word of mouth really helps when you have a core advisory who help you bring it forth.
All right, thank you. Next one is back to Mike. The lion's share of publicity in Ohio with vouchers goes to the Ed Choice Scholarship. This scholarship that allows students in low-performing public schools to attend a different school. But I was surprised to note that I believe that 12% of your students use the newly created John Peterson Special Needs Scholarship. So what does that scholarship mean for a school? Because for those of you who don't know, instead of just getting approximately $5,000 for a student, you get a differentiated amount based upon the student's disability and what their learning needs are. So how has that allowed you to change the services you provide to students?
Prior to the John Peterson Scholarship, and I think most private schools, at least most private, Christian schools, and we did it at one time, we tested kids in and we only took you if you were at or above grade level. And I think it comes down to being mission-minded. I mean, we were mission-minded, and that's not the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is everybody, and it's, Jesus reached out to the low, and really that's was our mindset, was being mission-minded. So we were turning away good families who wanted something different because they were below grade. So we just didn't feel comfortable for that. So we actually started to take kids. I'll be honest with you, we didn't know they had IEPs when they came in. We weren't that sophisticated. So honestly, we woke up one day and realized we had 20 kids that had IEPs, and the parents didn't tell us, and we didn't know because we never did that before. So we were actually doing it before the John Peterson came in. And when John Peterson came in, then that enabled us, because you need funding. I mean, there's no question special education requires additional funding. If you're gonna do it, we do not take kids in that we can't help. We will not do that. If I can't help you and I can't educate you, whether you're on the high scale or the low scale, we won't take you. But the John Peterson allowed us that additional monies. Now we have a fully staffed, we have 6 special education teachers. We've got about 7 classroom assistants, service, and we've got an entire department that's providing them the services that they need. So, we got into it because we were mission-minded, but then we really quickly learned that we needed to do this right. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. So it enabled us to really provide the services that these kids need, and they weren't getting, in the public schools that they were in. And most of our John Peterson kids do come from, the inner city also, a good degree of them.
Great, thank you, Mike. All right, back to Karen. One of the requirements, if those of you who aren't aware of it, all students using the Ed Choice Scholarship have to take the state assessment, the OAA or the OGT. What I was interested in learning from Karen's school is they actually administer the OAA to every student at the school, and they issue the Iowa Test of Basic Skills to their students as well. So tell me what went into that thinking, how you reached the conclusion to administer the OAA to all students, and what the ITBS test gives you, perhaps, that why you take that in addition to the OAA.
Well, we just tested the students on the Ed Choice, which was was very few students our first year, because the bulk of our Ed Choice students the very first year were kindergartners, and they don't have to take the OAA test. But as we increased our number of Ed Choice students, it became the larger proportion of the classroom. It just made sense. So from the second year on, we've tested all of the students using the OAA. The Iowa Test of Basic Skills is required by the Archdiocese. So they have switched, and now instead of a fall administration of the Iowa, they want us to test in the spring as well. So like the entire month of March and April is spent testing and making up tests. The OAA gives me a good gauge of where we are in relationship to the entire state. And I want our students to achieve at least at the level of the state, because the state is a good or good gauge for us, because the state, everybody takes it. In the Archdiocese, not everyone takes the OAA, just the Ed Choice kids. So I usually outscore the Archdiocese anyway. But I don't use that data. You know, I want to see how our kids, because our kids have to compete with all the other kids in the state for the same jobs. The Iowa test has a little bit different information on it. It provides us information more specific on the student. But I use both of those pieces of data when we develop our accreditation plan. Every 4 years, we develop a 4-year plan every 6 years to improve ourselves. So that data is very important. In fact, this last cycle, we just used the OAA data. We had switched from Terra Nova's to Iowa. So we do quite a bit of testing. This year, we're required to use the OTELA test, and we have a growing ELL population. So all of our students, 20-some, are being tested now, which takes time. But what's very nice, in my mind, about the state tests is they don't cost me any money. The tests come for free. The scoring is for free. The reports are for free. The Iowas, I have to pay for out of the budget. So obviously, it's a benefit. Do I wish we only did one test between March and April? Yes, I certainly do. And I would not be heartbroken if it was just the OAA test. But, you know, there's data there. We're kind of data rich. Our problem in my school, maybe in your schools, is we don't have the personnel or the time to mine that data as thoroughly as we would certainly like to be able to do it. We're probably all small and wear many, many, many hats. So the data is there. We use it. Could we use it better? No doubt.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Next question is for Monica. The Cleveland Voucher Program, law has been in existence since the mid-90s, has been serving kids in Cleveland for all that time. It recently changed to allow students to enter the voucher program as they enter 9th grade. Previously, only 8th grade students who were in an 8th grade voucher, getting a voucher in 8th grade, could go on into 9th grade. And the profile on St. Martin's mentioned that you've seen differences as a result of that. Now that anyone in this whole city of Cleveland, not just a 8th grade voucher student, can now apply to your school. So talk a little bit about what that change in law has meant to the school, how you've adapted to it, or what the effect has been.
So he's right. There used to be the law where the child had to already have had the voucher through their K through 8 experiences, and they had to bring along that voucher with them to high school. With the recent law change, now any student that's entering grade 9, any grade through K through 12, can apply for and receive the voucher if they're going to use it at a private school. We benefited from that change in law, of course, because before the law changed, we couldn't introduce or help a family who needed financial support with that scholarship. If they didn't already have it, there was nothing we could do. Well, now we're able to utilize that with families who come to us if they meet the other requirements of the scholarship. So it helps families in that respect. We did see a change in the types of students because now instead of a student having had private education where they were using that scholarship, now they're coming to us from your public schools, from your charter schools, from homeschooling. We are still really using our culture to have those students meet what we expect, meet our expectations in the school building. Those are expectations around academics, expectations around behavior, and again, those families as well. Parents only know of education what their experiences have been. And when they come to us, we do spend a lot of time with the whole entire family, not just the student. So of course we have more time with the student, but we're also taking in that family as well and teaching them the things that we expect. And also making sure that we deliver on what we promise that we can offer others.
Okay. Thank you, Monica. All right, the next question is for Deb. One of the criticisms nationally, less so in Ohio, that you sometimes hear about vouchers, usually from opponents, is that they tend to be discriminatory, that oftentimes minority students may not have access, may not utilize the scholarship, or that it may make a school become more less diverse, that it might be used to sort of, I guess, to be crass to say, resegregate schools. That's one of the criticisms you often hear. But some of the stats on St. Patrick's were interesting to me, because it looks like it's maybe had the opposite effect. So Deb, do you want to talk a little bit about how diversity has changed in your school since you've begun taking vouchers?
We were traditionally almost all-white school, and we are now 1/3 of all different minorities. And from what I understand, this is my 3rd year, I was used to it from day one because I never knew it before. And that was one of the pieces that our teachers talked about, and it did affect our next accreditation goal, which Karen was talking about. We have to go through accreditation, same as her, and we decided for our Catholic identity goal, we have to have a learning goal and a Catholic identity goal. We decided as a faculty, from the data from surveys from the faculty and the parents and the kids, we decided to work on our cultural diversity as our Catholic school identity. Because of, I mean, we just went through accreditation last year. We just got it re-accredited. And that is our Catholic identity goal for the next 4 years. And so I think it's wonderful that we have taken the initiative to keep working on that, to make sure that the cultural diversity in the classroom really works well.
All right, I want to turn it over to the audience in just a moment. I want to ask them each one question, sort of a rapid fire one. If there's anything about the voucher laws you could change if you were king or queen, what would that change be? What would you like to change about the law if there's, from a school's perspective? And I'll start with, since I started with Mike the first time, I'll start with him this time.
Well, change, and you guys had it in your conclusion, they raising the dollar amount that they give per student, because it's still pretty low, especially compared to how public schools run. So that'd probably be the main difference. That's really it. We've found that even the paperwork and the administration of the voucher program has been tremendous, and the key is they've kind of left us alone. I mean, it's, and that's another thing. They keep leaving us alone would be good, but it's just the dollar amount for us.
Okay. Karen?
Well, I'm going to disagree a little bit, but it seems as if regulations are changing all the time. It's very, very hard, like I said, in a small setting to have the right people in the right place to do this all the time. My secretary is also the nurse 4.5 days a week, and the door person and the phone person and the ed choice person. We have 173 students that she's got to make sure all the paperwork is in, to make sure that she gets the parents in there to sign the checks. So it is, on a small group, a small staff, a bit cumbersome, and then the rule changes. And then they've had a few computer problems recently, and shutting the whole system down, and that just complicates it. And now if we had one dedicated person and that's all they did, that would be delightful. And I'm sure it would almost be a full-time job just doing that. But like Mike, we're very, very grateful for the funds. And compared with some of the families who left in the first year, who we chased around all the time for tuition and who didn't pay, the state pays, they pay on time, and we don't have to threaten to hold their report cards.
Amen.
All of that's a good for me.
Monica?
Well, I'm from the admissions side, so my stance would be some of the paperwork and some of the processing. I almost hope and wish that there was an opportunity for parents to really understand what they have. I don't really always know if parents are really able to articulate what they're receiving from the state. So much so that it's often a battle to get them in to sign it. It's often a battle and a complaint for certain paperwork that does not work if they were to submit it versus what we actually need to make the paperwork official. So maybe, some sort of small scale annual parent roundup or training or online, whatnot, that would really hone in on them being
Deb?
I took the advantage of asking Chris Knight, who's our superintendent of our schools, if he had anything, in case it ever came up, that he would like to be told in this forum. And he said everything that three others have said. But one piece that hasn't been mentioned yet is to keep going with the expansion scholarship. We were very surprised this year that we have 56 kindergartners, and 9 of our kindergartners received the expansion scholarship, and that's totally on income, totally income, not a lower performing school. And it was only through advertising from within our families that were considering going to our school or had already been registered. What's very wonderful about that is, like Ellen put in one part of the article from St. Pat's, was we do feel if we get them in kindergarten, we can keep them throughout the whole process because they're getting to know our parish family, school family from a very young age. So the expansion program is wonderful.
So this is your opportunity, audience, for questions. If you don't have any, I have a whole page more. I can just keep going. So there is a microphone in the center, and we are recording this, so careful what you say, but go ahead and go up to the microphone. Otherwise, if no one has a question, go ahead.
Ken Clore with Bishop Hartley High School, 9 through 12. We've been in the program since its beginning. We've embraced it. We love it. Our issue is staying in it. 160, 23% of our students are ed choice. Since they went back and not increased the $5,000 like they did for the first couple years, there's a large gap between that scholarship and the staffing that we have to incur for those additional students. Help. You know, we know our mission. We want to be there, but we have no idea how this is going to continue. As students rise through the K-8 and come over, our numbers are going up continually. And with the mandatory volunteer program or offering of the volunteer program, a very small percentage pay anything additional to the $5,000. Any ideas?
Well,
Or are we alone in this?
go ahead, schools, if you have ideas or if you have a similar experience, go ahead and share that. I will say this, I anticipate we're going to have a second panel discussion in about 5 to 10 minutes, and I anticipate some of those folks may mention those issues you raised.
I don't have an answer, but I do know that the Catholic schools in Toledo feel the same way the high school are trying to figure out how to do the volunteer piece.
I apologize that I can't offer much either from Cleveland, and that's because although we're very grateful for the scholarship, the majority of our budget is made up through our work study program, and that's a part of the network that we belong to.
Figure out how she does that. That'll help.
Yeah.
You know, for us, it's not been totally an issue yet because our tuition up until 2 years ago was below the ed choice. So we don't have a big variation. You must have a big variation between your tuition you charge and the ed choice.
3,000.
Yeah, ours is, this year it's going to be $370. But, you know, you'd be amazed how hard that is too. You know, it is. And the families that the families that we serve, $20 a month's a lot of money. And you know, but it doesn't have an economic impact for us like you're talking about.
At this pace, though, I think it will over in the next several years, if the fee is indeed frozen, it will work its way down to the elementary schools. And I'm just scared that it's going to be a K-8 program over a period of time, you know, and then I think we're doing a disservice to our students, giving them a K-8 experience and then asking them to return to the public school system.
The gap is
Without
getting
that.
bigger. It's getting bigger between what we get and what it costs to educate that student. And we try to keep the cost as low as possible, but there's services, like I said, we can't offer.
Well, what is your K-8 school?
We're a K-8 school.
So, I mean, you can close your enrollment. You know, you have so many kids for your classroom.
Right.
In high schools, it's difficult to do that. You have to have one more math class, one more math section. And these, you know, it's a reality.
Well, thank you. And if the expert panel or the next panel, the policy expert panel, doesn't address it, go ahead and, you know, punish them with the same question. No, of course, I understand. Charlie?
Hi, I'm Charlie Wilson. I teach education law at the Ohio State University's College of Law. I also happen to be a Worthington School Board member. And I have two really important, I think, fundamental philosophical questions. The first one is, I'm a person of deep faith. My faith is very important to me, and the mission of my faith is very important. And I certainly treasure and value other people's faith and how important it is to them. But, and actually, this is partly provoked by what was said up here, and also a conversation I had with the principal at a charter school here in Columbus, that their mission, and they're very proud of the fact of how many families and children they've converted to the Islam faith. And you were talking about how many children have been converted to Catholicism. And again, I fully embrace that. My problem, though, is, you know, whether it be the Columbus Charter School or your Ed Choice, the use of public monies, taxpayer monies, to fulfill that faith mission. So that's my first question, is from a philosophical standpoint, is that an appropriate use of taxpayer monies to help families convert to Islam, or to convert to Catholicism, or to, I should never heard of it, but to Judaism, or whatever it might be?
Well, I'm a failure. I've been a Catholic school principal in an urban setting for 21 years. The first 13 years in a school that had 97% non-Catholics. I don't, well, I'm going to, you know, Father Satish is probably going to have a heart attack. I don't use that as a statistic that I'm responsible for, because my mission is not conversion. That's God's mission. My mission is, as a Catholic school principal, is evangelization. It's the word. If somebody takes that and they take it further and decide to join a Catholic church, a Methodist church, a Buddhist church, that's their choice. I have absolutely no role in that. If I were teaching an American school in a foreign country, I would be teaching information about the American way of life and American Constitution and all that other stuff. So I would expect that people choose to come there not to be converted, but because there's other things in their life, as I mentioned, that we are meeting a need. We're meeting a need. And the Supreme Court, I think, has already determined that it's okay for us to use public money in religious schools.
And I would answer that too. And we're a non-denominational school, so we've got, you name it, they're there. But you know, I think it's absolutely the job of the state is to give their kids the best education they can get. And because of the state of, at least where we're at, you know, we're doing that for the state of Ohio. The Christian things that we do, and the love and those kind of things are benefits and byproducts, and help us to do that for that child. But I think the tremendous social benefit that we're helping the state with, we're caring. You know, you hear about caring for families and doing all the things that we do. I don't think there's any question that's a proper use of that money, because number one, we're educating kids. I mean, I think every one of us, that's our first. We're schools. We're not churches. I think we'll all know that we are not churches. We're schools, and that comes first. And I think that's the importance, that we have to maintain that in order to keep these programs going. But I think that the social benefit we're doing is tremendous, and with much lower price and much lower cost.
I would say amen.
There you go.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Did you have a second question?
Yeah, the second question is and it touches upon, and I was hoping you all would address, Ellen raised the question in her opening remarks, which is, now that the Ed Choice program has been opened up, and obviously the charter school program has always been available, regardless of the quality of the public school system that the children are coming from. And so I guess I'm personalizing this to a degree, but I'm proud of our district. We, for 5 straight years, have been excellent with distinction. Most of our schools are blue ribbon schools. We've won every award that the federal government and the state government has ever given to public schools, and yet we're losing millions and millions of dollars every year to the voucher program or to, to charter schools between the cost of transporting children and to paying for the deduct. And of course now with the new Ed Choice program coming about, so we don't even know how many students we're losing. But is that a proper expenditure of public monies, of using public monies to basically destroy the quality of high-quality public schools? You know, I was envious. We've had to get rid of secretaries. We've had to get, our schools don't have nurses now. We've had to get rid of our gifted students program because of the massive costs of charter schools and the Ed Choice programs, especially the Peterson and the autism scholarships.
I want to commend your district for the great work that it's doing, but I think that, quite honestly, if all the schools across the state had been doing such great work, the voucher program wouldn't be in existence. So commendable for the work that's happening, in your district, but we're trying to fill that gap for those other districts that are not exceeding in the same way.
But why should we bear the cost when we're doing a good job?
Well, I think the issue is, and I don't understand the funding mechanism totally of public school funding, and because I've been in our meetings where, our suburban schools, which are very great, we have great, especially our outlying suburbs, all excellent schools, same thing. And they talk about, and we have a lot of charter schools in Youngstown, and can't quite figure out how charter school money, and this is not for discussion, but how it's draining, like you're saying, it's draining the suburb schools for kids going to city charter schools. I'm not sure how that funding works. I never could understand that, but, I think listen, with open enrollment, same with open enrollment, where public schools are now battling for the same kids. I think education is going to be forced to become an open market, and I think this is part of it. And if there's, as long as there's people want different reasons. They go to schools for different reasons. People move to certain towns for different reasons. And it's the same thing. And I think it's school choice. It's what people want. And then listen, we're not getting the money. The families are getting the money. Taxpayers are getting the dollars, not our schools. They're choosing to come to our schools because they have that right, but it's not coming directly to us. So I think it's just a matter of choice and a matter of open market, and that's what we have to do. And I think we save this. Our average net tuition number is probably $3,700, and my high school would be rated excellent if based on all the criteria. All of our kids take the OGTs. We do our own report card because we want to, and even with the economically disadvantaged kids we have, and we would be rated excellent based on those things. So I think we have to continue to do that. And I think it's just a matter of school choice and open markets.
Okay, just from a funding standpoint, though, like our district gets a little over $1,000 per student from the state, but on average, because of Peterson and autism scholarships, on average, we lose in the deduct about $15,000 for every child going to a charter school or getting a voucher. So that's and we lose about $14,000 to $15,000 per student.
But you're also not educating that student either, though. When you lose that student, you're not educating them either. So,
but the marginal cost of educating one student is zero, essentially. Okay. The marginal cost is when you get 35 more students.
I understand the issue. That's a really complicated. I understand it.
Yeah. All right, this will be our last question, and we'll go ahead and do a quick change of panels, and then we'll have a Q&A session for the next panel as well. Go ahead.
Barbara DeLuca, professor at the University of Dayton in school finance, of all things.
Another money question.
Is there a movement afloat at all or is it in your mission at all to set up a program to teach public schools what you're doing right? At the risk of speaking heresy, I still believe in public schools, and they're still in our Constitution. The state is still responsible for funding schools, and I see another goal in all of this, and that's to improve public schools. The reason charter schools, vouchers, all of those programs were put in place was originally to instill competition in public schools to force them to get better. So is there anything in the program that you're working on to teach public schools what you're doing right?
Well, we're never asked. You know?
Yeah, good comeback, Karen. I know you too well. That was good.
We're actually doing a program to improve our culture at our school that has been in charter schools, been in public schools, and in non-public schools. It's called Workshop Way, and it has changed our culture for the better in the school to meet the needs of a diverse population, to meet the needs of the teachers. But it's a pretty intensive program. We presented at the University of Dayton, but because it's a change or a work, nobody's come to us and said, hey, will you train us? But I think there's an awful lot that the non-publics, the Catholics, and the publics could learn from one another. It's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. But I go to some of the meetings with the public school administrators, and God love them. I know they're I shouldn't have said God love them. But I know that their work is incredibly time-consuming and draining. But there's a separation, and it's not the religious one. It's I'm public school, and I make more money, and you're probably not credentialed. You don't hold, and I do have it. So it's going to take maybe something like the Ohio State University and University of Dayton to pull us all together and to say, hey, you're doing something really well. Are there ways that maybe some of our special needs students could be helped with collaboration with the public school services there? I don't know. I think the sky's the limit for our collaboration. But, somebody's got to put their foot out, put it out there. And unfortunately, I'm just speaking for myself, I don't see the public school coming to us. In fact, I've heard occasionally that there are certain administrators in previous lifetimes at Dayton Public who are not happy and they don't like me. And I said, how do they even know who I am? But because we are very intentional about helping our families get the ed choice, and they have to jump through all the hoops, they don't like us. Oh, well, it's their rules. So there is lots and lots that we could do together.
Well, thank you for that.
Can I mention one thing?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Okay. In answer to your question, I think the teachers are doing that. I do believe that the teachers are working, and I know for a fact. I come from a family, my daughter works for TPS. I have other family members in the extended family that are public school teachers. And when we gather at family events and talk about what we're doing, and we find out that we're all have to do the same kind of evaluations for our teachers, and we all have to find the best practices. And when you get in those kind of settings, you know that between the public and private school teachers, they're communicating. And it's happening, and we're all finding out what's working best with our kids.
Well, thank you very much to our panelists. If this and Ellen's opening comments don't make you want to read the entire report, then you just weren't paying attention. So thank you, and now let's go ahead and shift to our next panel.